October 15th, 1943. Alexandra Land, Franz Josef Archipelago, Arctic Circle, 1217 hours. The wind crawled across the frozen ridge like a living thing, dragging needles of ice that scraped against goggles and numbed exposed skin within seconds. The Arctic sun hung low, more suggestion than light, casting a pale orange glow over the endless white desert. Snowdrifts rose like frozen waves, stretching toward a distant coastline buried under slabs of ice. For decades, this part of the Franz Josef Archipelago had belonged only to polar bears, drifting pack ice, and storms that could swallow entire expeditions. No one expected anything else to survive here, certainly not a German weather station. But as the Soviet patrol from the 713th Separate Reconnaissance Company crested the final ridge, they saw it. A line of steel antenna masts jutting out from a cluster of half-buried wooden huts, snow creeping up their walls, smoke faintly trailing from a ventilation stack. A structure where no structure should have been. "Captain, that's no abandoned hut," Sergeant Ivanov muttered, frost clinging to his beard. Captain Mikhail Sokolov raised his field glasses. Through the swirling snow, he spotted the black cross stenciled faintly on a fuel drum beside a half-buried generator. The sight punched breath from his lungs. "We have found them. Operation Alexandra." The existence of a German Arctic weather network, remote, self-contained, and hidden, had been rumored for months. Luftwaffe transmissions intercepted by naval intelligence hinted at Operation Wunderland II, a chain of polar weather stations feeding encrypted meteorological data to U-boats and long-range aircraft. But no Soviet unit had ever found one intact, until now. The patrol descended carefully, weapons raised, boots crunching through crusted snow. The silence felt unnatural, broken only by the distant groan of shifting ice. Then, a single bark echoed from behind the station. A dog, a German sled dog, not wild, trained, alive. Someone was here. Sokolov signaled the men to fan out. Their breath formed heavy clouds as they moved between the huts, weather-beaten structures with ice crystals clinging to every nail. The first door they reached was frozen shut. The second opened with a groan, revealing a cramped radio room lit by the dim flicker of a kerosene lamp. The equipment was German: teleprinters, code sheets pinned to the wall, frequency charts. Half-eaten food lay frozen on a metal tray. Boots sat beside a cot, their laces stiff with frost. But no people. They left in a hurry, or something made them leave. Sokolov examined the radio logbook left open on the desk. The last entry was only 3 days old. WX Prime, storm index rising, emergency preparations. Then nothing, as if the station had simply gone silent in the middle of a transmission. The patrol moved deeper into the camp. They found an observation hut filled with meteorological instruments, barometers coated in frost, anemometers frozen mid-spin, a supply depot half buried in snowdrifts, filled with ammunition crates and ration boxes stamped with German Eagle insignias. A generator still warm to the touch, meaning someone had shut it off not long before. But the strangest thing were the footprints, hundreds of them circling the camp, some leading toward a collapsed overhang where the weight of ice had crushed part of a storage building. The prints were chaotic, overlapping, many dragging as if men had stumbled or been carried. "Sir," Private Markov called out, voice tight with unease. "Over here." The patrol gathered near the rear of the station, where a large tent was partially collapsed beneath snow. The canvas had been slashed open from the inside. Inside lay dozens of medical kits, scattered across the floor, tin plates, a bucket of frozen water, and blood. Brown, frozen into the canvas, smeared across the snow, leading outward in a trail that vanished into the white nothing beyond the station perimeter. "What happened here?" Ivanov breathed. Sokolov crouched beside a medical manual. The German handwriting inside was frantic, uneven. Lebensmittelvergiftung, schwere Symptome, Erbrechen, Schwäche, nicht kampffähig. Food poisoning, severe symptoms, vomiting, weakness, not combat capable. Another line, Bären, keine Spuren, keine Geräusche, Männer verschwinden. Bears, no tracks, no sound, men disappearing. Sokolov closed the manual slowly. They were sick, desperately so. From what? Spoiled meat? Disease? Contaminated supplies? A sudden metallic bang echoed across the camp, loud enough to send the entire patrol ducking behind crates and snowbanks. Sokolov raised his rifle. Positions! The men aimed toward the noise, coming from the eastern hut, its door swinging slightly in the wind. Sokolov approached slowly, boots crunching. He pushed the door open with the tip of his rifle. Inside was a kitchen, pots frozen mid-boil, bread crusted into ice, tins scattered across the floor. In the corner lay 3 German soldiers, or what they were left of. Their uniforms were stiff with frost, their faces pale and sunken, mouths open as if caught mid-scream. One clutched his stomach. Another's hands were frozen around an empty tin marked Ice Bear Fleisch, polar bear meat. The third lay half buried in snow blown through a cracked window, his fingers pointing toward the ceiling as if trying to warn anyone who entered. Ivanov swallowed hard. Poisoned, all of them. Not poison. Trichinella, parasites, raw bear meat. He exhaled slowly. It killed them. Then where are the rest? Sokolov looked toward the white horizon beyond the station, an endless, silent expanse of ice and shadow. The footprints that led away from the medical tent vanished into a swirling fog. Dozens of men, no sound, no final transmissions, no bodies. As if the Arctic itself had swallowed them. A sudden gust of wind slammed the hut door shut behind them, echoing like a gunshot in the frozen stillness. Sokolov felt the ice settle in his bones as he whispered, "This station didn't fall to battle." He looked around at the abandoned camp, the untouched rifles, the half-open notebooks, the generator still warm to the touch. It fell to the Arctic. And something out there, in the white void, was still unaccounted for. October 15th, 1943. Alexandra Land, Franz Josef Archipelago, 1406 hours. The Arctic fog thickened as the Soviet patrol regrouped outside the eastern hut, their breath crystallizing in the frigid air. The dead Germans inside lay like frozen warnings, faces contorted, limbs stiff, skin drained of all warmth. But it wasn't death that unsettled Captain Mikhail Sokolov most. It was the absence of the others. The station had been built for at least a dozen men, possibly more, and yet only 3 bodies had been found. The footprints circling the camp had been many. The trail leading away from the medical tent showed signs of men stumbling, dragging, collapsing. But that trail faded into nothing just a few meters past the perimeter, as if the ice had simply swallowed them. "Captain," Sergeant Ivanov called, pointing toward the northern edge of the camp. "We found something." Sokolov trudged through knee-deep snow, the wind slicing across his cheeks like razors. His men stood around a half-buried wooden crate uncovered by recent wind. It was marked with a faded German eagle, and below it a word stenciled in bold black letters, Notfall, emergency. Sokolov brushed frost from the lid and pried it open. Inside were signal flares, a flare pistol, sealed tins of medical alcohol, and a waterproof journal wrapped tightly in waxed cloth. He opened the journal. The first few pages were routine weather logs, temperatures, wind speeds, snow cycles. But halfway through, the handwriting changed. The lines became frantic, uneven. 18 September. First man sick after consuming ice bear meat. Violent cramps, vomiting, We suspect parasites. We have boiled the rest of the meat, hoping it is enough. 20 September. 4 more men sick. Supplies dwindling. Storm prevents evacuation. Radio operator says HQ is evaluating options. 22 September. Men delirious, hearing things at night, seeing movement on the ridge. No tracks in snow. Impossible. The next page had a blotch of frozen blood on it. 25 September. Dieter vanished. No prints in snow. No noise. Only his coat left by the generator house. Sokolov stared at the words, his stomach tightening. "Sir," Ivanov whispered. Sokolov looked up. At the far end of the camp, beside a stack of oil drums, a trail of bloody footprints led into a jagged field of ice blocks. They were human footprints at first, then deeper, more uneven, as if the person had begun to stumble. Then they stopped, completely. There were no signs of struggle, no drag marks, no collapse, just an abrupt end, as if the man had stepped off the world. The Arctic wind moaned through the ice field like a distant animal. "Spread out," Sokolov ordered quietly. "No more than 20 meters apart. Weapons ready. Eyes sharp." The patrol fanned through the blocks of ice, towering formations carved by centuries of storms. The frozen columns cast long shadows that felt unnervingly alive in the shifting light. Private Markov approached the end of one shadow and froze. "Captain," he whispered, "come see this." Sokolov approached, crunching through the crusted snow. At the base of an ice block lay a torn scrap of cloth, German uniform fabric, frozen stiff. Next to it, half buried in snow, lay a single boot, still laced, still warm on the inside. No foot inside. Sokolov lifted it slowly, dread building in his chest. "Something frightened them," he murmured. "Something made them run." Ivanov spotted a small metal object trapped under the ice nearby, a crucifix on a broken chain. Were they praying? Sokolov frowned. These men were trained meteorologists and naval personnel. They don't panic easily. Another wind gust swept through the ice field, carrying with it a hollow, low sound like a distant groan buried beneath the storm. Several men lifted their rifles. "What was that?" Markov asked. No one answered. At 14:27, the weather shifted abruptly. The air pressure dropped so fast that Sokolov's ears popped. Snow began blowing sideways in violent dusts. The Arctic could change moods in minutes, but this was too sudden, too sharp. A polar microstorm. "Back to the station," Sokolov ordered. The patrol moved quickly, but halfway through the retreat, Private Mechkov slipped between two slabs of ice, disappearing with a shout. "Mechkov!" Ivanov dove, grabbing his arm, pulling him up. The young soldier scrambled onto the surface, his face pale. "There's something under the ice," he gasped. "Something moved." "It's shifting pack ice," Ivanov said, though he didn't sound convinced. Sokolov looked at the widening crack Mechkov had fallen into, and for a moment he thought he saw dark water swirling beneath the surface. But then something else, a shadow, large, slow, drifting beneath the surface. Too big for a seal, too slow for a whale, too close for comfort. "Move," Sokolov barked. They reached the huts as the storm slammed into the camp with full force, wind screaming, snow blinding. The Soviet soldiers hunkered down in the radio room, sealing the door and lighting 2 lanterns. The walls creaked under the pressure of the gale. The storm shrieked outside like a wounded animal. Inside, the men sat in tense silence. "Captain," Ivanov whispered. Sokolov didn't look at him. Instead, he stared at the map pinned to the wall, one showing the coastline, the ice shelves, and beneath it a hand-drawn note in messy German handwriting. "Etwas in der Tiefe. Nicht Tier, nicht Mensch, im Eis gefangen, erwacht. Something in the deep, not an animal, not a man, trapped in the ice, awakened. A blast of wind rattled the door violently, hard enough to shake snow from the roof. Every man flinched. Markov tightened his grip on his rifle. "Captain, is something out there?" Sokolov glanced toward the window, where the swirling snow briefly parted and something moved just beyond the light. Something large, something slow, something watching. He stepped back from the window, voice low. "We wait for the storm to break, and then we find out what killed the Germans." October 15th, 1943. Alexandra land, Franz Josef Archipelago. 1742 hours. The storm finally weakened as the pale Arctic twilight returned, washing the abandoned German weather station in a cold, ghostly glow. Captain Mikhail Sokolov and his Soviet patrol stepped cautiously into the open, boots sinking into fresh, untouched snow that had erased every footprint, every trace of the German crew, and every path the Soviets themselves had made earlier. The storm had reset the world like a blank sheet of ice. Only the broken medical tent still fluttered unnervingly, its torn canvas flapping outward as though something inside had pushed against it moments before. The wind had died too suddenly, the silence settling like a weight. Sokolov felt unease crawling up his spine. According to the journal they'd found, the Germans had fallen ill from trichinella after eating raw polar bear meat. But the last entries spoke of men vanishing without tracks, of whispers in the snow, of something moving at night beyond the station perimeter. The final line echoed in his thoughts. Something in the deep, not an animal, not a man, awakened. He forced himself to focus. They needed answers before nightfall swallowed the camp again. "Spread out, 20 meters apart. Sweep the north ice field," Sokolov ordered. His men moved cautiously, rifles raised, lanterns held high. The station looked small now, dwarfed by the towering blue-white ice blocks surrounding it, monoliths shaped by centuries of glacial winds. The Soviets entered the ice field. Narrow corridors of frozen walls created a maze where shadows warped and stretched. Sokolov felt the sense of being watched, the same pressure he'd felt when reading the German journal. Then Private Markov stopped abruptly and pointed. At the center of the sunken hollow lay a man, a German, face down, half buried in snow. Sokolov's heart tightened as he approached. He rolled the corpse over. The face was pale blue, frozen in an expression of horrible fear. Deep scratches marred the uniform. The man's hands were contorted, fingers bent at unnatural angles, as though he had been clawing at the air before death. Sokolov murmured, "He didn't die here. He was placed here." The men shifted uneasily. Before they could speak further, a sound echoed through the ice field, a faint whistle. 3 notes, soft, almost human. It drifted between the ice columns like a voice carried on the wind. "Captain," Ivanov whispered, "that's what the journal described." Sokolov lifted a hand for silence. The whistle came again, closer. Markov muttered, "It must be a survivor." Mechkov shook his head, "Or something pretending to be one." The lantern light flickered as they turned. A shape moved between 2 ice towers, tall, gray, indistinct, sliding rather than walking. Sokolov hissed, "Hold fire!" But fear struck faster than orders. A rifle cracked. The ice rang with the echo. The shape vanished instantly. "Back to the station!" Sokolov barked. The men retreated through the ice maze, boots slipping as adrenaline spiked. Behind them, something moved, silent, smooth, gliding through the ice corridors. Another whistle echoed, now from their left. Shadows shifted unnaturally. Markov stumbled. Mechkov dragged him upright. Ivanov fired a burst blindly into the frozen blue, bullets pinging uselessly off ice. They broke free at last from the ice field, stumbling into the open. The station stood only 50 meters away. Sokolov turned and froze. A massive silhouette emerged at the edge of the ice, tall, hunched, covered in ragged fur or frostbitten cloth. No face, no eyes, no legs visible beneath the mass, only the impossible way it slid across the snow, leaving no footprints. Every man felt something primal twist inside him, not fear, something deeper, recognition, as if the Arctic itself had shaped a guardian out of shadow and cold. The thing paused, its outline wavering like heat above ice, watching them with a presence that needed no eyes. Sokolov raised his rifle, though his hands shook. "Stop! Don't come closer!" The thing stopped. The wind died completely, the world falling into an unnatural stillness. Then the shape turned, slowly, and withdrew back into the ice, disappearing without a sound. The Soviets bolted for the station, slamming the door behind them. Lanterns shook in trembling hands. No one spoke for several minutes. Finally, Ivanov whispered, That wasn't hunting us." Sokolov stared at the German journal lying on the table. "No, it wasn't." Markov swallowed hard. "Then what killed the Germans?" Sokolov opened the journal to the last page, where the final desperate scrawl read, "It takes the sick first." His pulse quickened. "The Germans were delirious, weak, hallucinating." Ivanov nodded slowly. "Easy prey." "But it didn't attack us," Markov said. "We're healthy, armed, together." Sokolov closed the journal. It wasn't a predator. It was something older, territorial. The storm woke it, not us. The wind outside began to rise again, soft at first, then growing into a low, mournful howl. A whistle, 3 distant notes, carried through the darkness. Mechkov shuddered. "Captain, is it coming back?" Sokolov blew out the lantern flame. "No, not for us." He looked at his men, voice steady but low. "We leave at first light. We report what we found, and we never come back to this place." Outside, the Arctic roared as the winds circled the station, an ancient breath moving through the ice. The thing in the snow did not approach again. It only watched, unseen, as the foreigners prepared to flee its frozen domain, its silence a warning, its presence a reminder that in the deep north, the greatest secrets were not built by men, but awakened by them.